Hey everybody, welcome back. I read Brutus #1, so you don't have to. Smash that like button and let's find out why anti-federalists were so opposed to the Constitution. Alright, so Brutus #1 is the preeminent anti-federalist paper for AP Gov, written to oppose ratification of the Constitution. This paper will be super useful for the argument essay, since it's the only document that argues for states' rights and against a stronger central government. So let's get into the specifics. Right from the jump, Brutus emphasizes the permanence of the decision if people vote for ratification, warning that if this new federal government is established, the people won't be able to take that power back. It says that when the people once part with power, they can seldom or never resume it again but by force. In other words, if you regret this decision in a few years, you won't be able to change your mind. You'll have to fight if you want out. And for not the last time, this warning by Brutus seems prophetic. To the author, the real decision is, do we want 13 sovereign states that come together as a confederacy, or should it be one large republic under federal control? Because whether that's what the framers intended or not, that's what's going to happen if this constitution gets adopted. He claims the necessary and proper clause and the supremacy clause will give the federal government absolute and uncontrollable power. That's a dramatic claim, so let's unpack it, starting with the necessary and proper clause. Article 1, Section 8 lists the enumerated powers of Congress, but then the last line is called the necessary and proper clause, which says, Congress shall have power to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers. Brutus says that these powers are very general and may justify the passing of almost any law. He kinda has a point here. This clause has definitely expanded the powers of Congress to legislate beyond just their enumerated powers. That's true. However, Congress can't pass literally any law based on this clause. Rather, it has to be related to their enumerated powers. So good intuition, but maybe not quite as dramatic as he suggested. In Article 4, the Supremacy Clause declares that this Constitution and federal laws shall be the supreme law of the land. It's pretty easy to see why an anti-federalist wouldn't like this one. Due to the Supremacy Clause, whenever state and federal laws conflict, the federal law is superior. As a result of these two clauses, he predicts that even though some small degree of power is left to the states, those powers reserved to the states will soon be annihilated. This will reduce the country to one single government, the new federal government, leaving the states irrelevant. His argument is very simple. If Congress can do it, they will do it. He basically says that the few remaining powers left to the states will become annoying to the federal government, so Congress will naturally be inclined to remove that annoyance, meaning the states, and get them out of the way once and for all. The next thing that draws his ire is the Constitution giving Congress the power to lay and collect taxes. He says that this is the end of the US being a confederation like the Articles of Confederation set up, and rather it embraces the idea of a single large republic. His preference is for states to maintain their sovereignty, so this is another unacceptable provision. But it's not just that. Taxation is the most important power that can be granted to a government, and while it's the means of protection, security, and defense in a good government, it is the great engine of oppression and tyranny in a bad government. And when you remember that he says that Congress is going to have absolute and uncontrollable power, it's clear that he's warning that this power to tax will be used tyrannically. If the power to tax weren't bad enough, the Constitution allows the creation of standing armies during peacetime. And Brutus says that this will lead to nothing less than the destruction of liberty. I mean, dude is really against his Constitution. To his point, how free can people really be if the government always has an army that can enforce its coercive powers? We also get an observation from Brutus on human nature. It says that every man who's given some power will be disposed to increase that power. Interestingly, Madison in Federalist 10 and 51 makes essentially that same observation, but draws a different conclusion than Brutus, who uses that inclination to argue that the federal will dominate the states. Brutus also warns that the Supreme Court will end up dominating and swallowing up the power of state courts. This touches on the anti-federalist fear of a federal Supreme Court that would empower itself to strike down state laws because of the Supremacy Clause. The rest of Brutus #1 is an exploration of whether it's better to have a single large republic or 13 small republics. He starts by showing that history is on his side, saying that history furnishes no example of a free republic anything like the size of the United States. He points out that the Greek and Roman republics were both republics as long as they were small, but when they became large empires, guess what? Goodbye republics and hello tyranny. Not surprisingly, our states' rights advocate argues that 13 small republics would be better. Remember, he wants the people to be as free as possible. He briefly describes a pure democracy, and while he doesn't explicitly endorse a democracy over a republic, it's clear that the author is sympathetic to the idea of democracy, though he points out that a democracy could only be successful in a small area, such as a single city. Clearly, as many political things as can be done at the local level by the people themselves, the better. Use Brutus to argue for participatory democracy, where people are as directly involved in policymaking as possible. The problem with representation in a large republic is that you have two options, neither of which are desirable. You could have a very large number of representatives so that each representative knows the sentiments of the people. But the problem is that then you'd have such a large legislature that it wouldn't be able to function. Or you reduce the number of representatives so that Congress can function, but then the representatives will be representing so many people that they won't really know what their constituents want, and therefore laws won't really be derived from the consent of the people, in which case you don't really have a republic anymore. Brutus also argues that the US is too diverse to be a single republic. The people are too different from each other, so Congress will be full of clashing opinions and fighting, and it will prevent them from promoting the public good. The claim is that a republic needs to contain people who are similar to one another, otherwise it'll never work. Alright, so that's Brutus number 1. I'd like to briefly review a few good ways to use Brutus on the argument essay. The most obvious way is to argue for states' rights in any topic about state versus federal power. You can also use Brutus to support individual rights. He warned extensively about a tyrannical government because his biggest concern was the liberty of the people. And you can use Brutus to support participatory democracy since he wanted people to have as much influence over policy as possible. And that's it for this one. Be sure to watch my videos on each of the Federalist Papers, and until next time, this has been a LaMoney production. Thanks again for watching, and if you want to do your best in class and on the exam, consider checking out the Ultimate Review Packet. 3 full-length practice tests, great study guides, tons of practice for each unit, and exclusive FRQ help in practice. Preview Unit 1 for free, and I will see you in the next video.